Some more, please. Oh.
That being said, so last week we talked about, we started a series of porn kills up. Now, can anyone give me a brief summary of the three main areas that pornography or affects your life?
It was the brain.
Yes, that's one.
The heart.
No, hey.
Oh.
Ooh. One.
I thought you wanted me to give all three.
Now we have five, so one more. Samuel had his hand up. Yes, that's part of it, but there was a way to summarize it that I had. I didn't call it sex trafficking. You remember? That was part of it. I said it affects your brain, it affects your relationships, and it affects
oxytocin thing.
No, think of the big three categories.
Believe religion?
That's part of a category.
Oh, your brain.
The last one,
right.
The world. Okay? Hey, can y'all sit down, please? Michaela, please find. Hey, Stephen. Come on. All right. I would like to not have to edit this video because I keep having to stop down and get on.
I would like you to edit my name out of it.
Anyway, okay. So I said there's three primary ways pornography affects the culture we live in. It affects your brain development, it affects your relationships, and it affects the world. And under that category of the world, we talked about how there's sex trafficking is a huge part of pornography, unfortunately. So last week we kind of hit a lot of the harder parts to hear about porn. We talked about the consequences, the side effects, not just for you, but for other people. And so it's kind of a harder lesson last time. It was kind of a little bit awkward at some points because of just how uncomfortable some of these truths are. But today, we're over that big hump, okay? We're over that big, hard beginning. And so today, for the next... Huh?
You should probably refrain from saying that.
Oh, gosh. Anyway, so now we're going to start the first of three lies that we're going to talk about for the next 2-3 weeks. So, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. No, that's the wrong one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me go.
Yeah, you should
Over here.
refrain from what you keep on saying.
Wow.
Let me try this again. Wow, I had last week's thing pulled up.
Yeah.
IQ 1 million.
IQ -70.
You're on charge. You should.
Oh, okay. You got next one.
Here we go. Now let's pull it up.
One more line. You're gonna pull
How
some
did you have
points.
numbers? How did you?
Don't know.
Huh? Numbers?
Yeah.
That's magic. Okay, so here we go. I want to read this verse to you guys real quick, because this is going to kind of be the basis of tonight's lesson. So John chapter 8, verses 31 through 36. John 8, chapters 31 through 36. I'm going to go ahead and read these. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Okay, that's the verse I want to focus on. So keep that in mind. It says, and they answered him, "We are the offspring of Abraham. We have never been enslaved to anyone." What do you mean by we will become free? They're saying, we've never been slaves. What do you mean? They're thinking about physical freedom. But then Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son remains forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." It says, "I know that you're the offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my Father, and you do what you have heard from your father." So to kind of summarize that there, what Jesus is saying is, look, if you are practicing sin, you are a slave to it. It has control over your life. It doesn't matter what sin it is, but you're saying there's control. And so Jesus is addressing a religious crowd, okay, that believes that because that they descend from Abraham, remember the guy in the Old Testament who God made promises that because my ancestor is Abraham, that I'm good with my relationship with God. But Jesus is saying that's not good enough. That doesn't mean anything because you guys don't believe in me. You guys, practice your own religion outside of what God has taught. You are depending upon your own man-made ways of dealing with things, but yet you're still a slave to your sin. You haven't broken free from it yet because you don't have me, and I am the truth, and the truth will set you free. I will set you free, but you have to follow me. So there's three lies that our culture believes that I think cause people to become in bondage to pornography. And I don't just mean like you personally have a porn addiction. I also mean these lies don't just affect those who have a porn addiction. These lies also affect people who don't even watch porn. So this series is not just for like if you have a hardcore porn. This isn't like an Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? That's not what I'm here to do with y'all. I'm here to talk about how pornography affects every part of the world we live in and how it may be affecting you and you don't even realize it. So, we're going to get started. What is the first lie? Here it is. Lie number 1 is this. The human body is primarily a sexual object. The human body, or I said up there, I just have the phrases, the human body is a sexual object. Now, most of you are probably thinking in your mind, I don't believe that. Tyler, I don't think that the body is just like something, like a sex object. I don't think that, so like, why is that an issue we're addressing? But we're going to get into the reason of why that actually is something that most people believe. Okay? Are y'all ready for this?
See.
First of all, we have to understand something. Here's the deal. When I say this is a lie people believe that the human body is a sexual object, I'm not saying that I can figure out what people believe, like I can see into you, like I have x-ray vision or anything like that. What I am saying is the way people behave reflects what they believe. So up here, you'll see this is split into 2 halves on your notes if you're taking them. You guys are already filling in. It's a good job there. We're going to see how both the world, the unsaved people, and even people in the church believe this same lie. We're going to see how it plays out differently, but it's the same lie. So the world would say, you know, the human body, it is a sexual thing, but it's fun. We should enjoy it to the maximum without restriction. That's how a lot of people in the world see it. Like, hey, it is a sexual thing, so just do whatever we want. It's our lives, it's our bodies, we can do what we want. But then what's the next thing that obviously follows from that is then people begin to use their bodies to sell sex. They use their bodies to make profit, whether that's pornography directly, whether that's modeling on Instagram, whether that's having a premium Snapchat, you name it, people will sell their bodies for money because they believe the lie that their body is a sexual object and they want to make money off it. But then what's the consequence of that for the world? Well, the desire for sex and money leads many people to be abused. And that's what we talked about last week. We see how that leads to abuse. Okay? So then how do people, even that are Christians, how do they believe this lie? In what way? Well, it's very similar. It starts off the same. A lot of Christians also see the body as a sexual object, but instead of saying, therefore we should embrace it, they go, therefore it is shameful and we should never look at it in an okay light. See, the world says, oh no, the human body is a sexual object, so let's embrace it and have no boundaries. But then a lot of Christians say, no, it is a sexual object, it's always shameful. Always, never, ever, ever look at it in a positive light. It's an inherently naughty thing by itself. So then what do the Christians do in response to that belief? They say people will begin to cover their bodies, and every ounce of it, and some churches have way more strict dress codes than others. And why do they do that? Because they believe that just the mere sight of something is enough to trigger this domino effect in your life.
Shoulders
of
are
lust.
very tempting.
Yeah, watch out for those shoulders, bro. Now, am I saying that we should walk around naked? No. But I'm saying, what I'm pointing out here is a chain of thought. We're going to come back around to that. But then what is the consequence of Christians who are so obsessed with dress codes and not seeing anything? What is the consequence of that? Is anytime they feel attracted to someone else, shame, they begin to feel shame. Inherently, just that they feel that the human body is a sexual thing. It's a bad thing. We should never look at it. We should never see it, and it ever always cover it up. But then anytime they feel attracted, the inevitable thing comes. They feel shame. They feel like they can't break free from a porn addiction because they feel like it's inherently a part of who they are. They can't help but see the body as sexual, even though they believe they shouldn't. Do y'all see where I'm going? So it's 2 sides of the same coin. I need y'all to pay attention. Where the world believes the human body is a sexual object, and in the way they treat it and think about it. But then so does the church. The end result for the world is people get abused. The end result for many Christians is they feel eternally shamed and guilty and they can never be free from pornography. But the whole point of this series is to show you how you can be free from it. Right? Okay. Yeah. Clap. But here's the truth. Here's the truth. The body is a beautiful creation of God that bears His image. Y'all get that? The body is a beautiful creation of God that bears His image. So we're going to go right on over to Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to go to verse 26. Just so you guys can know that I'm not making this up, but this really is in the Word of God. Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 26, says this. It says, and then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over everything that creeps on the earth. It says, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female created he, them. So you have to understand what this is saying here, and some people have, maybe you're asking yourself, okay, it says we're made in God's image. Does that mean that God looks exactly like us?
No.
Not necessarily, okay? Obviously, God is, in order for him to be God, he has to exist in like a spiritual dimension, right? So he can't be trapped in a physical body like we are. But it's important to know that in the Hebrew, which is the original language this was written in, the word image is meant to be a literal, like physical resemblance. The word they use for image in Hebrew is talking about some sort of physical form. So when we're talking about, now you don't literally look like God. You obviously are limited. You have a human fleshly body. But God does have a spiritual form of some kind. And so when God made you, not only did he make you to some extent to resemble his spiritual form, but also you guys have the ability to use reason and rational thought. You guys have emotions that you can think through. You guys have free will. These are all things that animals don't have. Okay? So God created humans not only in a sense to have a physical, okay, it's not our bodies are not just a physical representation of God. They on a spiritual level, the fact that you have the ability to think that you have a spirit within you, right, that goes on to be with God in heaven, or it goes to be separated from in hell, is evidence that God, you're not only is your physical body meant to be a work of art that God made, but even your own attributes are meant to be a reflection of God, who gave you free will, who gave you creativity. So why am I talking about this? How is this directly related to porn? Because here's the deal, okay? In order for anyone, in order for a lie to be sold to you, it has to be wrapped in some kind of truth. In order for pornography to have power, in order for it to draw people in order for the sexualized culture we live in order for it to actually be able to draw people into it, it has to wrap itself in some kind of truth. You know what a Trojan horse is? You ever heard this story?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't know what it is, basically, I'm going to use this example up here. Like, okay, what's this
Rat
thing
bait.
up here?
It's rat bait.
Rat poison. Okay, and the rat poison comes in these blocks. Okay, and sometimes it'll have, or not sometimes, all the time, it has this little amount of poison in it. The block, it compromises the normal. What's in the block is 99% of it is completely safe food. Less than 1% of that block is actually poison. Less than 1%, but it's enough to kill the rat. In order for Satan, in order for the world to be able to sell you this lie that the human body is a sexual object, it first has to acknowledge something that's true. And what is acknowledged that is true? Are human bodies good looking?
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes.
We can all, now for the most part, we can say in general, okay, our bodies are a work of art. God made them. They ought to look good, correct? God made them. He's an artist. Now, some of you may think, well, I don't like my body, or I don't like this thing, or I don't like this flaw. But understand, your body is a reflection of the God who made you. So because of that truth, it is normal for humans to inherently look at each other and go, man, they look good. That's why sex exists. God made us in order to be able to notice attractiveness. He made us that way. But here's the deal. Our attractiveness was never meant to be perceived as we should see each other as a sexual object. God made you to reflect his image, not so that you could selfishly look at your brothers and sisters, not literally, but metaphorically speaking, your brothers and sisters, and to see them as sexual objects. That is the lie. The truth is, our bodies are beautiful. They are a wonderful creation of God, but the lie is they are sexual objects meant for our own pleasure. But in order for porn to sell the lie, it first has to hook you with some truth. Yeah, the bodies are attractive. But they have to corrupt that and pervert it for their own ends. Do y'all see what I'm saying? So then, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, I'm going to read this real quick. Genesis 2:7 says this, and this is kind of just to make sure you understand. It says, "Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed in the nostrils of flesh the breath of life, and the man became a living creature." You are the only thing that God actually made with his own hands. Everything else God spoke into existence left and right. This exists, this exists, this exists. Human beings are the only thing that God made out of his own hands. He got his hands dirty just to make you. So just so you understand, God took a lot of time making us. It's very important to understand. We're going to talk real quick. So in our culture today, now, anytime people will see nudity today, it's usually seen in a sexual context. Whether it's on advertisements, it's in movies, music videos, okay, social media. When people are usually trying to display their bodies, it's not for a normal reason. It's usually because they're trying to sell sex in some way. right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, why do you think a lot of rap artists, they'll bring women that are pretty much half naked in their videos? They're trying to draw people in sexually, right? Why do you think movies have sex scenes in it? Why do you think 50 Shades of Grey was able to make as much money as it did?
That's a
Because
great movie,
they
by
are
the way.
trying to sell sex, right? But here's the deal. There are cases where the human body, in its natural state, meaning unclothed, was not perceived or not seen as being a sexual thing. So we're going to go over some examples of this. So in Isaiah chapter 20, verse 2, we see one of these examples. Let me go to it. Isaiah 20, verse 2 says this. It says, "And at that time the Lord spoke by Isaiah the son of Amoz, saying, Go," y'all listen, "go and loose thy sackcloth off from your waist, and take off your sandals from your feet. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot." So God is asking Isaiah the prophet, the priest of God, to walk around barefoot and naked. But here's why he does. It says, "Then the Lord said, As my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign, okay, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives, exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot with buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of you." So God is saying, he ordered Isaiah, his prophet, to walk around and prophesy from what this says, naked and barefoot. Some people, hey, I need you to listen to that, please. Now, some people have pointed out the fact that it's possible he wasn't completely like 100% butt naked, okay? They think that in the old times that priests would wear these undergarments, okay? So they'd have their priestly robes, which are beautiful and like decked out, but then they would have their undergarments. Okay, so they believe that, and it could have been referring to the fact that God was merely asking him, take off your priestly robes, and so he would have been wearing what's the equivalent of like boxers, right? That's all he would have had. But regardless, the point is, Isaiah was walking around either completely naked or almost naked, but no one saw that as sexual. No one was like, bro, he's causing me to trip up over here. There weren't like women. See, I don't know if Isaiah was good looking or not. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I have no clue. Maybe the dude was jacked. But no one saw him doing that as a sexual thing. They were able to see his body and to not immediately their mind wander off to places it shouldn't have gone. Y'all see what I'm saying? There's another example of this. We're in John chapter 21, verse 7. There's an example. I'll let you read it or write that verse down if you want. But essentially the example here is Peter is out on the boat. Okay, you know, Peter was a fisherman before he followed Jesus. So he's out on a boat, and this is after Jesus is resurrected from the dead. He's been appearing to other different people. So Peter's out fishing with his bros, and it says that he gets word that Jesus is on the shoreline. So then what he does is he puts on his clothes because he was completely naked. It was very common for people and fishermen to do their work completely naked in the middle of the day, you know, out on, not even the sea, it was really a giant lake is where Peter was fishing at. So no doubt people could have seen him from the shore. But he was out doing his job, just minding his own business. No one had a problem with it. Because it wasn't pornography. It wasn't like he's doing anything wrong with his body. Y'all see what I'm saying? Yeah. Lastly, here's another example I want to talk about is baptism. Now today when we baptize, we do it clothed, which is appropriate, right? We don't want to have any problems. But in many cases, and there's many places in the early church where they actually baptized naked. When someone wanted to get saved, they would actually have them take off all their clothes, and the reason for that was just as you were born into the world naked, you came into this world with nothing, so you're being brought into your new life with God with nothing as well. It was symbolic of the fact that you're not bringing anything to God. You're just bringing yourself. You're surrendering yourself to God, right? So that was symbolic. So now, did all the church do this? No. Okay, so a lot of churches didn't do this, but a lot did. And so it's interesting. Now, that practice obviously is not done today. And if we were to ever even attempt that once, we'd be sued, and with our church doors would be closed down next week, right? Because that's seen as inappropriate. There's laws against that now. But my point is that with all these three examples in history, we see cases where people were nude publicly, and it was not perceived as sexual. So that's interesting because now when we see it, we typically, our mind goes to, there's something wrong with that. It's like, it's bad. It's sexual. We usually see the context of being treated in a sexual way. We're not used to seeing nudity like this casually. That's not something we ever experience. We only see it typically in a sexual way. But there are examples today where nudity is seen in a way that is natural and not inappropriate. And one first example, this is art. Y'all ever been into an art museum? There are cases where, paintings, sculptures, and whatnot of naked people. Now, these paintings and sculptures, they're not sexual, okay? They're not pornographic. They're not designed to cause you to be aroused. They're just meant to display the beauty of the human body. A lot of famous Christian artists throughout history have been they were the ones doing all the nude paintings. The statue right here is the statue of David. If y'all have ever seen that, you've probably seen an art class before or a remake of it. But it's this giant statue, what he believed David to look like. It was made, I don't want to get the name wrong, so I'm not going to say it, but it was one of the big artists. And so anyway, this giant statue was David completely naked. Everything. Nothing was covered. It wasn't like the Adam and Eve, kids' book illustration where like the leaves are covering stuff. No, I mean, it's completely naked. And no one saw that as, oh, that's inappropriate. That's wrong. Like, no, it's a work of art. Okay? Now, what's another example of this? Doctors. Okay? If you are a doctor, you have probably seen more nudity than any pornographer has ever seen in their entire life. Because doctors, their job is to understand the human body, to understand how it works. They're constantly having to look at medical sketches. They're having to look at x-rays. They're having to operate on naked bodies. They're helping give birth. So doctors have a constant exposure to nudity, but do you think that their minds are being inappropriate while they're doing it? No. Now, if a doctor did do that, he would be held accountable, wouldn't he? If he was to start taking pictures or start doing inappropriate things, but that almost never happens. Why is that? Because doctors have a respect for the human body. They don't treat it as a sexual object. They treat it as, this is just the human body, okay? It is part of who they are, and there's no reason to be weird about it or be inappropriate about it. It's a work of art, more or less, and so they're there to take care of it and to nurture it. They have respect for it. The last example is a mortician. Some of you guys may not know what that is. That's essentially when you die, when bodies are prepared for burial, that's what their job is to prepare bodies for burial. So in order to do that, they're going to have to unclothe the body and prepare it and make sure it's ready for that. Morticians also get exposure to a lot of nudity. Now in their case, it's a little bit more sad. It's not like I'm helping someone stay alive like a doctor. In their case, that someone's already dead, so it's a little bit more sad. But the same thing applies. Do you think that they're off thinking these terrible, inappropriate things on the bodies they work on? If they have done it, and it's rare, they're held accountable, are they not?
Right.
The point being that I'm making in this, even in today, there are examples where we are expected to treat the body with respect. Now, if any of these groups fail to do that, society will shame them and even sometimes legally punish them if they fail to do it. Right? For these. The point that I'm making in that is that sometimes we hold doctors and we hold morticians to higher standards than we hold ourselves to when it comes to how we look at God's creation. We expect these people to have more respect for the human body than we sometimes hold ourselves to. I'm going to read another passage here, and this is going to kind of summarize where this whole, I think, came from of people beginning to treat the body or see it in a way that was not what God intended. So in Genesis chapter 3, this is describing the fall of Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 6, and we're going to try to read through this as quickly as possible. It says, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of this fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked." Remember, God made them naked. He didn't make them with clothes. That wasn't his intention. So it says, as soon as they ate the fruit, it says their eyes were opened, and they knew that they were naked. Hold on to that thought. I know you're like, what? How does it make any sense? It says, and then they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves clothes, essentially, the best they could. And they heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of God among the trees in the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you? Adam, where are you at?" Did God know where Adam was at?
Where you at, homie? Of course.
He was asking him a rhetorical question because he wants Adam to think, where are you at spiritually right now? Okay? It says, "Where are you at?" And then Adam said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you to not eat?" And then Adam's response right here is rich. "Well, the woman you gave me, to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." So immediately, he feels shameful about his body. God didn't tell him to feel that way. And so what's his response? "Well, God, the woman you gave me, it's her fault. You gave her to me. She made me eat it." And then God goes to the woman and says, "What is it that you have done? What did you just do?" He's blaming you, so what did you do? Then she goes, "Oh, it was that serpent. It was that weird snake thing. He deceived me, and I ate." Y'all see what I'm saying? They're blaming everything else but themselves for their problems. Now, to clarify something, Adam and Eve, okay, had eyeballs, okay, before they sinned. Did they know that could they physically see each other's bodies?
Yes.
What it's talking about here when it says the eyes of both of them were opened and they saw that they were naked, it's not that they literally did not know they were naked.
They just realized.
What this is talking about is they were experiencing shame over their bodies. Now remember this, who is your body an image of? God. It's a reflection of the God who made you. Adam and Eve had never sinned. They'd always had this relationship with God up until the day that they rebelled against Him. In the moment they sin against God, the first thing that happens to them is they immediately become ashamed of their bodies, which is a reflection of God. They become ashamed of the very thing of God's ultimate handiwork, His ultimate work of art. That is what they become ashamed of because their own bodies remind them, we have sinned against God, the one who made us, our Father. So become ashamed of their bodies not because, okay, they are naked. That's not what they're ashamed of. They're ashamed because their bodies remind them of the God they've had this relationship with all of their lives. And now they have that broken relationship, and they are ashamed. They feel like it's almost as if, I've heard some theologians describe it, it's almost as if they felt so guilty and overwhelmed as if there were eyes looking at them, as if there was like this condemning presence, that God seeing them naked would almost be condemning to them. He's like, God is looking at His creation, which is supposed to be a reflection of Him, and they feel like, oh, we're not worthy to even be seen. We're not worthy to bear the body that you made for us. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see from their perspective exactly what they were thinking. But the point is, they became ashamed of their bodies. And from that point forward, okay, we see that shame, that guilt, and that sin nature begin to grow. And as time has continued, okay, and in the society we live in today, I think you guys could probably agree that most of the time when nudity is seen, people usually have an inappropriate response to it, or it's usually seen in a sexual context. Movies, entertainment, social media. The body is not usually seen in an artistic way. It's not usually, I don't think any of y'all are doctors, so you probably haven't seen anything in that context, and most of you probably are morticians. Most of the time when you guys see nudity, it's usually in a sexual way. And so most people don't have the thought process of our bodies are a reflection of God. We should respect it and have reverence for it. They begin to think. They begin to have thoughts run through their head. They begin to have desires form and have this immediate sexual response to a body that is meant to be an image of God. It's meant to be respected and treated with value and care. But their first response is sexual. Okay? So here's the deal. That shame that Adam and Eve experienced led to what? It led to them blaming someone else. So here's the deal. I'm going to summarize it this way. Lie number one causes us to devalue the human body and to not treasure it the way God does. Instead of Adam and Eve admitting fault that it was their own desires that led them to sin against God, they said, no. Adam was like, no, it's the woman. She messed me up. And the woman was like, no, it was the serpent. Can I draw a parallel there real quick? So if Adam is blaming the woman, I'm going to compare that to today where guys will say, God, it's not my fault I'm lusting after someone else. You made them look good. Oh, it's not my fault. And then what do the women do when they're confronted for the way they behave, the way they dress? God, it's not my fault. It's just the way everyone dresses. God, it's the culture. They're the ones that taught me to behave. So it's okay. Everyone else is doing it. Do y'all see how this works? Instead of admitting fault for what we are doing, we'd rather blame someone else. When the problem lies within our own hearts that are not seeing God's creation properly. Our own hearts that are not seeing each other with respect and reverence, but rather we have a heart that wants to see someone else as a sexual object. The way you, and if you still think I'm crazy and that I'm lying, and we're going to be dismissed, so don't freak out. I know we're a little bit over time. But if you still don't agree, you're like, man, I just don't think that's a problem. I don't think I see anyone in a sexual way. I don't think I look at them as a sexual object. I don't think I see them that way. Let me ask you this. What kind of thoughts do you think to yourself when you see someone who's attractive? What kind of things do you think about that person? How do you talk about them when they're not around to your friends? Okay? How do you think about someone And how do you talk about them with your friends? Think about it. I want you guys to be honest. This is for y'all to think about yourselves. If you think that this slide, that's not your problem, that's not me, I don't think of it that way, are you sure? Are you sure this hasn't affected you? Are you sure you've never gone to these places? I think if we're being honest, we can all probably admit there's been points in our life where we have treated people that way, where we have looked at them as sexual objects, and it's wrong. But God is saying, listen, here's the key. The first lie, and in order to overcome this first lie, you have to understand what your body really is. You have to replace the lie that you believed and replace it with God's truth. You have to learn to see things from God's perspective. So in conclusion, here's my conclusion.
Okay.
God is not a pornographer. Think what?
Okay.
God is not a pornographer. When God made your human bodies, He did not intend for it to be viewed in a pornographic way. He did not intend for you to treat it as a piece of meat for your own satisfaction.
Meat.
Not only physically, but mentally. God did not create you to think of your brothers and sisters. Okay? And I mean metaphorically, except unless you're in Alabama or something, all right? Metaphorically, God did not create you to think of your brothers and sisters as sexual objects. He intended us from the very beginning to see each other as being made in the image of God and worthy of respect. So that's unbelievably important. I'm going to close on one more verse. Y'all bear with me. Here's the last verse I'm going to close on. We're for real done. And you can get your chicken nuggets or whatever they have down there.
Pizza tonight.
Pizza, that sounds great.
Sick.
There we go. We're going to go to Romans chapter 12. It's just so much faster to use the Bible app sometimes.
Shut up.
Romans chapter 12, and we're going to read verses 1 and 2. That's my last slide, so it's not going to be up there. We're almost done. It says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Here's the next verse. Pay attention to this. This is the key. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. That by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Guys, this lie that the human body, looking at it and treating it and thinking of it as a sexual object, this thing is not something that God made you with. He did not make you to think that way. So what's gone wrong? You were born with a sin nature that is inherently in rebellion against God. But here's the great thing. If you're a Christian and you're saved, God has given you access to a new nature. And in order for you as a Christian to overcome these sins and overcome these lies and overcome these thought processes, in order for you to overcome those things, you have to put on the new man, which sees things the way God sees it, which thinks about things the way God thinks about it. The key to overcoming sin is not to try your hardest to avoid it. It's to not try to cover up every inch of your body, to wear burqas or whatever else that people wear. It's not to try to constantly say, I'm never going to look at anyone because I can't help but lust. No, the problem is your heart. The problem is your heart is not seeing God's creation properly. And the key for it is not going to be to try to close your eyes all the time, because sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes it's just there. That's just the culture we live in. So the key to not viewing it in a sexual way is not to close your eyes. The key is allowing this heart of yours to be transformed, to see things the way God sees it, to look at things the way God looks at them, and to value things the way God values it. Y'all tracking? Y'all get that? That is lie number 1. And that is how we're going to conclude tonight's session. We still got 2 more lies and 2 more things that we got to address. And these things are going to get a little bit more epic. You're going to see that all these pieces are going to be pulled together, and you're going to really start to see where we're going with this. So that being said, I'm going to pray us out, and we're going to be dismissed. Dear God, I want to thank you so much for once again bringing us here and allowing us to hear your word tonight. God, there is a deep, deep problem in our culture today. God, that people just don't look at your creation properly. That people have a hard time looking at each other and seeing the image of God that is on them. We have this tendency in our hearts to view our human relatives, that our brothers and sisters in Christ even, God, we have a tendency to view them in a way that is dishonorable, that is selfish, that is inappropriate, God, that is irreverent of them. God, in order for us to overcome this deeply ingrained mindset, God, we have to put on the new man that you have given us. We have to be transformed in our very hearts. Our minds and our hearts have to be transformed to see things the way you see it. The solution does not lie in avoiding things. God, we can't avoid everything that's out there, but we can have a transformed heart, which is what you have called us to have. God, that's why we are saved. So I pray for every youth in this room, God, no matter how young or old they are, no matter where they're at in regards to this issue, God, that you could allow them to begin to pursue, to see things the way you see it. That you could help them to begin to have that thought process of, how does God see this? God, help me to see this the way you see it. God, help me to think of people the way you think of them. God, help me to see the work of art that is on them. Help me to see your image in them and to not treat them as something merely meant for my pleasure. They are more than that. So God, I pray you can help everyone in this room to begin to pursue that pathway of seeing things the way you see it, to have a heart after your own heart, as you talk about in the Bible. And all these things in your name I pray. Amen.